Hello, Team Healthy. Here we are live. I know some of you are already sitting there and waiting, just chatting away with each other, and I really like that. All right, Fred and Margaret, and some of you down there in Australia, get some sleep. After the program is over, of course. We have people down in Australia. It's right around 2 o'clock in the morning on Thursday morning, I might add. There, we have people in Europe, and of course here in the North America area, all across the globe. I'm so pleased that you tune in and make this part of your day, and it's part of your personal growth. And I take your inclusion of me into your life in a very serious way. I'm so honored. Thank you so much. We have a very interesting set of questions here that we're going to go through. Those of you who are new, some of you, of course, are live, and then many of you are the majority of you are watching through the tape. But if you have a question, know that if you're live, you can put it in the live chat feed here, and I'll pick it up. Or if you're watching on tape, you can put it in the comments section below. I pick up the questions that come through the week, and then I next week I'll be answering the ones that came through, and that's what I'm doing here today. Now, I'm going to be talking today. I like to find a theme that seems to be a part um, of the questions that are there, and we're going to be talking today about a narcissist conflicted approach to love. Okay, and you're going to see in some of the questions how it's something that really can bring all sorts of havoc. There are a couple of personal things or things that I want to mention here. First, somebody asked me the question, are we going to have a live conference perhaps in October? I had mentioned a few months back that I really want to have a live conference. And we're going to have to figure out how we're going to do the logistics. And right now, everything is kind of up in abeyance. My marketing guy that I work so well with, named Steve, and then his associate Michelle, and Michelle is the one that works most closely with me. Steve is moving from Phoenix, which is where we were thinking about doing it, down to the Austin, Texas area, which actually is closer to me, and I'll be able to see him more. And so that's kind of thrown our possibility of a conference in a little bit of a quandary. I still know that it's in my mind, and at some point I'd like to do that. But in the meantime, we still have each other here on our live feeds. By the way, last week, I know, and I think the week before we were having a little bit of scratchy sound quality. I invested in a new microphone, so let's see if that works out well for us here today, and hopefully we won't have that. So just a little personal thing. Okay, so here we have the question about narcissists and their inability to love. Now, obviously, when we're talking about loving relationships, the first thing that comes to mind is inside the home, whether it's the person you're married to or live with, somebody that's in your extended family, a family member, but also it can include your social relations and even in work. When we say love, we might translate that into respect and honor at the workplace. Narcissists have great difficulty in their capacity to engage in that kind of way. They can love, if we can use that term, in such a way that as long as they're thinking it suits their narrative, makes them feel good about themselves, they'll try to go into that space. But what they refer to as love really isn't. And we're going to get to that as we go through the questions here. So, without further ado, let's just dive right in and see what some of you have to say and ask about this whole topic. And let's see if we can get a good perspective on this. First, the first question this person asked: when I ask for compliments or words of love and love and appreciation from my spouse, uh, it doesn't say here. My spouse says that's so when I ask for words of love and appreciation, my spouse says that's just not me. Is that a narcissist or is this just how some people are built? But am I expecting too much? Well, first, when a person says that's just not me, go ahead and believe that person. You didn't say it was a him or her, but believe them. And the only exception that I might make, I've had multiple questions about whether people that are on the autistic spectrum might also be narcissistic. And it's like, no, that's an entirely different kind of thing. People who are on the autistic spectrum or the Asperger spectrum, there's a neurological element and they have a harder time dealing with emotions and figuring them out and expressing them. But there's a lot of neurology, and I'm not going to get into all of that. So that's a bit different. Other than that, though, when a person says that's just not me, I just don't do that, it illustrates that these individuals have a deep and pervasive lack of empathy. That's one of the primary identifiers of narcissism. So when we talk about a person with a narcissistic bent, we want to remind ourselves that in order for that person to rationalize and justify their controlling ways, their many demands, and their many manipulations, they kind of have to turn off the human dimension. For them to say, hey, look, it's all about me and my cravings and my preferences. Well, by definition, it's their way of saying, and I don't care about you and your needs and your preferences. So when you approach relationships with a loving dimension, part of that implies I want to know you. And I want to know what's behind the scenes there. And I want to know what your backstory is. And I'd like to hear your perspectives. And as I get to know you, rather than weaponizing the information that I gain, I'm going to use the information to be able to more specifically target how I can give you affirmation or how I can be a positive presence in your life. Narcissists, though, because of their agenda and their insistence that everything has to go exactly as they say, they don't want to. So when a guy says or when a person says that's just not me, go ahead and believe it, and then I take that to mean I've committed myself. I've committed myself to me and my preferences and what somebody else thinks and feels. A long time ago, I decided, no, I'm not going to do that. It's not important enough. You're not important enough. And so acknowledge that that's what you're dealing with. And it's really sad when you are connected with someone and you feel like you have something to offer, and then they don't choose to reciprocate. Now, this next question takes it a little bit further. This person says, I've read and experienced that narcissists are looking for perfect love. That doesn't exist. Why is this true, or is it true? What would perfect look like to a narcissist? Okay, great question. So, yes, it is true. They're looking for perfect love. One of the defining features of narcissism is the individuals who are committed and fully pulled in by their narcissistic tendencies have a deep and abiding need to make themselves look wonderful. They've been exposed to lots of judgment and shame, whether they've been on the receiving end of it directly or just they've observed it from other individuals, and they've decided, well, the best way that I can be a somebody is to somehow divert any kind of shame coming from me. And so what they do is they concoct a false view of themselves, and we just call that the false self. And they convince themselves that, well, actually, I really am wonderful and I'm terrific. And they're very afraid of saying, I'm struggling, I'm hurting, I have difficulties, I have weaknesses. And so, in their mind, love is akin to idealism. And so, do they have an idealized view of love? And the answer is yes. When you love somebody, that means that you point out everything that's wonderful and beautiful about them. I had a conversation with my wife, actually fairly recently, and we were talking about a situation inside the extended Carter family. And one of the things that we just both affirmed is that when you love people, you show your weaknesses and you show your vulnerabilities, and you know each other's weak spots, and you admit it, and you encourage each other in the midst of all of that. In other words, love is to be loved. It requires a certain form of vulnerability. And the narcissist is thinking, there is no way I'm going to go into any kind of vulnerable space. And then they go back to that idealism. When you get to know me, you just need to say all the wonderful things about me. You need to tell me how terrific I am. And that's the way they operate. And of course, they're on the search for somebody who's going to fulfill that requirement. And it's going to be a long search because that person doesn't exist. But they're looking at this person nails it when they said, I've read and experienced that narcissists are looking for perfect love. And part of the reason they wind up being so angry is because what they're searching for doesn't exist. By the way, tomorrow's video that comes up on Thursday is all about, are narcissists committed to their anger? And the answer is yeah. It's like they just keep going back to their anger because they're not getting everything they want, and they kind of operate with the assumption, well, if I can pound people into submission, then I get what I want. In fact, we have a question that kind of goes into that. But that's the way they think. That's the way they operate, and it's incumbent upon you to recognize that so that you don't get pulled into their illogic. Now, the next question, and I'm going to assume that many of you have had this experience. This person starts by asking, am I unlovable? I'm constantly believing that I am. I lost myself. And he, the narcissist that she has lived with, and he was also so cold and emotionally, excuse me, and he was also cold emotionally, and it was really hard to get away from him. So this person says, am I unlovable? That's what I constantly believe. Now, we'll start with one truth, and that is the narcissist did, in fact, declare you to be unlovable. What does that tell you? Okay, keep in mind when we're talking about the pattern of narcissism, one of my defining features of narcissism is the absence of love. In fact, I had a video maybe about a year ago. It's about a new way of defining narcissism, and narcissism can be defined as the absence of love. And so here you have a narcissist that looks at you and says, I find you to be unlovable. That's kind of like somebody who doesn't know mathematics and says, let me teach you how to do calculus. Or somebody that is not at all gifted with music that says, let me teach you how to play the tuba. They don't know what they're doing. And yet in their game of pretense, it's like, well, I'm going to let you know, or I'm going to let you think that I'm the expert here. And when you break it down like that, it's like, wait a minute. So the narcissist, who by definition is lives in the absence of love, says, I find you to be unlovable. It's like, right. You don't know what love is. So, of course, you don't know how to find the loving part of me, and you don't know how to connect with me in a loving kind of way. What else would you expect? And so, when someone of that nature says you are indeed a lovable, or excuse me, an unlovable person, your first rule of thumb is to say, what's the source of that message? And when you come to terms with the reality, this is a person who is very poorly informed, and they're speaking as an expert, which is way, outside their league and their sense of normalcy. I don't have to buy into that. And so one of the aspects that I would work with people on in therapy when I was doing my practice is it's just kind of a relearning. One of the ways you relearn is to break down the messages that others have spoken to you and ask, okay, where did that come from? Does it make sense? What's the better alternative? What do you know is core truth that you can bank upon? And so when you hear of a narcissistic individual that says, I find you to be defective, it's like, well, defective, I guess that's a relative term. In your mind, it is. But then I don't want to filter my life through your characteristics anyway. You're not my filter system. So it's so important for you to go back to your basics and remember whoever taught you that doesn't understand human nature. Um, let's take this a little bit further. Another person asked, and this is a really interesting question, and see if you can agree with me on this one. This person says, do you believe that empathy is a trait or a skill? And I thought that was a really interesting question. And this person goes on to say, the narcissist in my life recognizes his lack of empathy, but uses it as a reason why he doesn't need to work on it. And of course, that part, if you acknowledge it, then okay, then work on it. But they don't want to. Is it a trait or is it a skill? Okay, let's see if we can break that down. when we talk about it being a trait, I'm going to put that under the category of it's just a part of who you are. For example, my wife, you may recall me saying in the past, was trained as an opera singer. And so she's married to me. And yeah, I'm musical. I play the radio real well. She's an opera singer. And then on top of it, you see that I have art in our home. Guess why? She's also an artist and she's beautifully skilled in all of that. It's a trait that she brings to the equation that I just don't have. And so there are certain skills or there are certain capabilities that people have that are just inborn and then some that are not. And I'm one of these that believes that empathy is kind of in that same category. There are some people that just have a natural knack toward being empathetic. And we refer to those individuals as the empath. And there's some people that when you talk with them, it's like, well, I want to get to know you more. And you just feel very comfortable in their presence. And I believe that there's an inborn giftedness that that person brings to the equation. Now, having said that, is it a skill? And when we talk about a skill, that implies that there's a potential that can be built upon and you can learn new elements of that. And yes, it is a skill. Now, to a narcissist, they might say it's a technique, which is different because a technique implies it's something they can use in a manipulative kind of way. Um, I think that in my work as a therapist, it's an outpouring of the fact that I have a natural empathy. Whenever I hear somebody say something or I sense somebody feeling it, I remember, and I won't get into stories, but I remember when I was a little kid, it'd be like, I want to know more. What's that all about? What's behind the scenes there? And nobody told me to be that way. It just kind of came out. It's just part of what I am. It's what was born inside of me. But then it also became a skill that I had to learn how to bring into nuances and develop and turn it into something even more full than it might have otherwise been. But I do believe that there are many people who are in that strong narcissistic bent. It's just inbred in them. It's just who they are, and it's sad to say that. Studies will show that about 50% or thereabout of your personality is just locked in. It's just what you are. It's what you inherited. It's genetics, and then the other 50% is the developed part. So part of it is you either have the trait or you don't, and then others, it's if you have the capability or the potential, it can still be taught as a skill. And so part of the reason that some of these narcissists don't change is because just like I'm never going to be able to play the flute because it's just not in me. I mean, I can learn some of the basics, but I just don't do it. And there's some people that they don't know how to do close relationships because it's not in them to do so. And so going back to the question before, I feel unlovable. Yeah, if you're dealing with somebody that it's not in them to know how to pronounce that and to share in that, that's what they're going to say because that's who they are. So factor that in and then remind yourself if you're the kind of person that says, well, I do seek love, and I think I seek love in a mature and an in depth kind of way. Don't filter it through that person who doesn't even have the gift or the care about the gift in the first place. So I find that to be a very intriguing kind of thing. Now, this next question. This person start with a comment. Narcissists are very needy people. The problem is they can't be reached. They have no reasoning. They thrive on degrading others. They're projecting their own feelings of worthlessness and inadequacy onto others. And then here's the question: why can't they learn that degrading people is not the way to get their needs met? Great question. And all it does, and with that question, what it does, as far as I'm concerned, it just exposes the fact these people have some real twisted logic. So the logic is you're not being what I want. You're not giving me the love. You're not giving me the affirmation. You're not giving me the praise that I like. So here's what we're going to do: I'm going to ridicule you until you give me love and respect. Seriously, you remember the old joke? The beatings will continue until morale improves. That's kind of the mindset that they're operating with. What I'll do is I'll belittle you, I'll devalue you, I'll remind you how poorly you measure up to my standards. And then maybe if you can figure out how correct I am, then we find love. Whew. And you look at that, and it's like, you don't really believe that, do you? And with the narcissist, it's like, why would you question me? And at that point, that's where we just go, I can't even compete with that. And you don't have to. You don't have to make it your job to make them see the light. It's like, wow, this is astounding. And so the fact is that they are very needy people. That's what this person wrote as their initial comment. But they're needy, and in the meantime, they seem to have no sense of appreciation for how they create the very neediness that they don't want by kicking people in the shins and then sticking out their hand saying, "Here, shake." Like, no, it doesn't work that way. And so remind yourself that in order to receive love, you need to be a giver of love. And when I say love, patience and kindness, you want to be a person of reason and approachability and peace. That's what we want to do. So, unfortunately, narcissists, by definition of what narcissism is, operate with a very and reason is just not something that goes along with them. Now, the next question, and I want you to pick up on this very initial phrase. We're going to come back to it. Hi, Dr. C. Hello. How do I understand? I'll make note of that. How do I understand that narcissists seem oblivious to the damage they cause to the people around them, and they smirk at the pain and hurt that they afflict, and the fact that they do know what's right and what's wrong? Do they see it and yet pretend they don't see it? And so she starts this by saying, how do I understand this? Okay, that's the part I want to focus on. Uh, this implies that the person who asked the question says, well, I see how dysfunctional they are. How do I understand it? And what I'm really hearing is it makes no sense to me. As I apply logic, everything that I see about their way of dealing with people, no reasoning, they degrade other individuals, and all the rest. They smirk when they create pain. The way you understand it is you accept ugly truth. Uh, Something doesn't have to be logical for you to understand it. There are individuals that are mean and caustic, and I can tell you, well, part of the reason is they don't have a whole lot of the beginning point that I mentioned anyway in their inborn temperament. But many times, let's say that person was exposed to a lot of harshness and meanness in their own family of origin, and so they learned that that's the language that you bargain with, and so they took it upon themselves to be better than the ones who gave them the harshness and the meanness, so they're even badder than the baddest. And so you can get an explanation, and it makes sense when you try to put that kind of reasoning on it. But the person that says, but how do I understand that, what you're really saying is, how do I get to the point to where that can be a comfortable thought within my mind? And the answer there is, it's not. Part of your ability to love, and this is a compliment, but it's also a frustration. Part of the ability to love is you feel another person's pain on their behalf. And narcissists are in a great deal of pain. They're in a great deal of turmoil and chaos on the inside. And so you can feel it with them. But then the rest of the story is, with some folks, it's like, I don't care if you feel it with me or not. I'm still not going to join you. And then it gets to the point of you coming to terms with the fact there's only a certain percentage of folks that are going to really make the effort to know with me and connect with me in a healthy way. You may have heard me say at other times that I believe maybe 20% of the population really does make an effort to think things through fully and carefully about healthy relationships. You think 20%, is it that low? And sometimes I don't mean to be too pessimistic, but sometimes I wonder, is it that high? Now there are some people that they may be nice enough, but they just don't think. They just kind of go along like drones, and they do what needs to be done, and they're functional. And there's a high percentage of people that are in that category. And then some people, they're just given over to their own darkness and their own evil. and they don't want to do it. And then there's some people, and this is where you come in. I'm making the assumption by virtue of the fact that not only do you watch the videos, but you're zeroing in on question and answer things, saying, I want to figure this out. There's some people that it's such a delight to be with, because it's like, no, I really want to be one of those that says the world is a better place because of my presence in it. But unfortunately, you may not have the percentage of people that want to enter into that space with you. You can understand it intellectually, but it never it may never get to the point where it's comfortable all the way emotionally. And in you being a loving person, sometimes it means you do carry a certain amount of pain or hurt or disillusionment, and frankly, you don't want to completely get rid of that, because you don't want to just go into a numb neutral position. So it's a part of the blessing and the curse of being a person that knows how to love well. You see things that they won't see. You carry hurt that is there because you want love, and then you understand. And some people that they'll go alongside with their arm around my shoulder, so to speak, and then there are others. It's like unimpressed. It's like, okay, good to know. Then that's going to be someone that I'm not going to invest my emotional energy into all the way. Now another question, and this kind of goes along with the same kind of theme here. This person says the narcissist in my life is totally insecure and has no healthy core. Uh, they feed off of others, and yet they're self-impressed and feel like there's nothing wrong with them. What's that all about? So the self-impressed part, um, again, going back to what love is, one of the core ingredients that allows you to be a person of love is humility. Um, when I look at myself, it's like, well, I have some nice things going on inside of me, and then there's some parts of me that I wish could be improved or better. The bottom line is, I'm not the center of the universe. I have a certain allotted number of days, I guess we can say, and then when I'm done, I'm done. I'm finished, and I'll go on. And so there's a sense that says, I know I'm not the center of the universe. That being the case, I'm not going to approach people with such a self-impressed kind of an attitude that's like, well, everybody needs to know me, because I know, well, I'm limited. I have things I'd like to offer. I have things that I want to share in my time here and in the amount of influence that I might have. And I'm okay with that. Narcissists are not at all grounded in humility. They're grounded in egotism. It's like, well, do you know who I am? If you don't, you should. Do you know how special I am? If you don't treat me special, you ought to. And they have such an attitude of entitlement, and kind of goes back to that whole story of Narcissus leaning into the pond, just being enamored with what he sees. That it's like that's all I can focus on. And so egotism and their high need for control and their high self-impressed mindset actually inhibits their ability to love, because it's like, well, my focus is only inward, and I'm so proud of myself in that false kind of way that I don't have the humility that's necessary for me to hold myself as one who has valid needs and pluses and minuses, just as I see that with you. They can't think that way. It's not in their skill set. Okay. Now, another question, and this is another one that I suspect that many of you can relate to on a personal level. This person says, why didn't I see the manipulation and lack of insight in my ex husband before I married him? Notice the term ex. Are narcissists just good actors early on and then abandon all pretense at being open once they've hooked you in? And you're asking the question, but let's just take the question mark on it and say, yeah, just make it a statement. Are they good actors? They're good actors. And do they just abandon all pretense once they've got you hooked? They abandon all pretense. You know, this idealized approach toward life, and this notion that says I have to have the highest accolades and I want people to think that I'm wonderful, it can't be sustained. And again, I go back to that conversation I had a little earlier with my wife, and when we're talking about how intimacy involves knowing the pluses and the minuses. When I know some things about you that are imperfect, and I say, How may I assist you? That's love. Narcissists like, no, I want you to know the things that are ideal, and we're going to keep it that way. And because we are all a mixed bag, it can't be sustained. And so, in order for them to be able to love you more fully, then they would have to lay that down. But instead, what they do is when they engage with people, particularly in the early stages, like this person asked about, they tend to go into the love bombing, which is not really love, and they try to impress you to think, now do you see how terrific of a person I am? And they it's that false self that they're committed to. And then when you eventually say, "Hey, look, there's cracks in this dike here, and I see it," rather than them saying, "Let's talk about that and let's see if we can help one another in what we find about with each other," they don't go there. It's like, "How dare you say something about me that might imply that I need to grow?" Loving people, it's like, okay, you see things in me just as I do in you. How can we assist each other? Now that we know each other more fully, how can we be a positive presence that's just not in the makeup of love, of narcissism? You can see how over and over I state narcissism can be defined as the absence of love. Okay, now I have another one. And when I read this, I just kind of chuckled because, anyway, let me read it to you. I'm wondering if you think that those that display hardcore narcissistic traits ever scroll up their texts and read what they wrote and then realize, hey, why is it that I send texts like this, but I never receive them? So, so why, why do they do this? And then this person puts in parentheses, assuming they know normal people. Do they ever have a glimmer of insight when reading the way that they communicate and see that it's way off base? Okay, you're thinking too much like a normal person. That's both a compliment and a caution at the same time. Do they just look back and see what they've written and realize, ooh, I must have been in a bad mood that day, or that was inappropriate. Upon further review, I shouldn't have said that, or I need to retract that, or I need to make amends. It's like once they've committed to their alternate reality, and the alternate reality is I'm special, you're not, and they have to be superior, they're committed to it. And then they're committed to the anger that goes along with it. They're committed to the condescension, to the evasiveness, to the defensiveness. All of that is part of that false self. And it's like, yeah, that seems like a good way to go. And you're over there saying, "Look at what you wrote down in your text. You want to tell me that's okay?" And they'll look like, "So, you caused it." And so it's somehow if you do catch them red-handed at something that's deeply inappropriate, it's not their fault. And so I know that if you're a healthy, normal, introspective person, it makes no sense to say, "Well, I just guess that's what they are." But that's what they are. And what it tells us is you're limited then in terms of the people that you can be really closest to. Some individuals can do relationships as long as it's superficial enough and we don't have to get into the hard stuff. But then once you get into the part where our humanity is exposed or our needs or our discomforts are there, then they show themselves to say, I don't know how to connect. Another of my favorite terms is emotional incompetence. They never really learned how to process their own emotions, much less the emotions of other individuals as a kid. And so it shows up in their later years, and that's what you're experiencing. Now, this next one. Why do I keep kidding myself that maybe the next time I talk with my husband, that's going to be the one that will make him wake up and treat me better? Is there something wrong with me? Okay. And the answer, and this kind of goes back to that person that asked the question, I got pulled in the early stages. What does that say about me? Sometimes you can be in your own needy position. You think, well, maybe if I say this, that's going to help. Maybe if I do that for them, or I offer favors, maybe then that's going to impress that person. And sometimes you have to ask, is there something wrong with me? And the answer might be, are you bringing a neediness, a craving to be loved, that you're willing to overlook common sense when common sense shows up? And sometimes the answer is yeah, that's what happens. And so there are times when you find yourself, particularly in an ongoing way, connected to someone who doesn't love, and you just keep throwing yourself at them over and over. You have to start asking, well, what? Yeah, I need to know what it tells me about them, but what does it tell me about me? And sometimes it's like, have you learned that it's not okay for you to have boundaries? And if that's the case, it's like, well, I need to unlearn that. Or maybe that you've overemphasized empathy to the extent that you have underemphasized assertiveness. And so, yes, be willing to take a look at what that says, not in a shaming way, not in a way that says, well, this proves that you're no good, but just in a learning kind of way. That's what insight leads you to. And if there's something inside of you that predisposes you to have too much of that willing spirit, then you can make the corrections that would be necessary. Okay, and then I want to end on this question. And again, this is one that I suspect many of you can relate to. This person asked the question: the narcissist in my past is gone, but I wonder, will I ever be able to love again? I feel too damaged, and I dread believing that it might happen again or it might not. That's a normal way for a person to think. I gave myself over to someone, and I thought that I was going to be loving and I could be the kind of person you could count on. And all I got was kicked. I can say it differently, but you know what I'm saying. I got kicked. I got dismissed. I got thrown to the curb. I got told that I'm no good. Now that I'm out here on my own, do I want to go through the effort all over again? Or is it just over? Will I ever be able to love again? Now, I understand that if you've been hurt, you may want to do an adjustment in your strategies, and it may be that you'll think, and I know people that'll say, I'm X number of years old and I don't feel like I have to get remarried. Or somebody else may say, well, I've had certain friends that I gave myself over to, and I need to be way more cautious in the way I do it in the future. I mean, who knows what the possibilities are there. And I understand that you want to have an adjustment in that direction. But let's be careful that we don't do the extremism where you go all the way from this extreme all the way to the other extreme. I gave myself in love and it didn't work out. I am not going to put myself out there ever again. There are decent people out there, and there are people that want to engage with someone like yourself, I hope, that says, I want to love and I want to be someone who is reliable. And others would say, honestly, me too. And I'm hoping that that you'll remain open to that possibility. I'm not saying that you have to go find that person in order for you to be a satisfied individual, but at the same time, don't close yourself off. And it may be that it'll take a very different form from what you've experienced. But let's make sure that a narcissist doesn't so grab hold of what you know reality to be that they have the final word. I'm hoping that you know within yourself, I like being a loving person. I like being somebody of dignity, respect, and civility. That's what we do here on Team Healthy. I know that there are some people that that message could resonate with. I'll be open to it. I'm not going to be desperate. And then if I see signs that someone says I'm not going to do it, it's like, even you use your hurt to have a little bit more of a caution. But like I say, let's see if we can stay away from the extremes. I don't want to filter my way of life through what a narcissist has and has not done with me. Okay. All right. I really like getting these questions from you. And so go ahead and keep putting the questions out there. And it allows me to know who you are much more fully. Actually, as I read through some of these, it's like, oh, yeah, I recognize that person's name. And then I kind of get to know a little bit of what your story might be. And again, I thank you for entrusting me with these kind of things. We're on Team Healthy here, and let's resolve together that we can be given over to anger, we can be given over to control and overbearing and judging and all of that. That's an option. You can do that. Let's pick better options, and you know what those would be. So stick with your efforts. Thank you for letting me be part of your journey. We got another week ahead of us. And I will see you next Wednesday or whenever you're watching on live feed with Dr. C and midweek with Dr. C. And by the way, I've got a new webinar that's coming up mid to late September. I think it's the 19th. It's a Tuesday about a narcissist anger versus your calm confidence. Man, that's going to be a really good one. It's kind of in my wheelhouse. I've done so many anger workshops in the past. I'm going to be talking about that. So you'll be getting some information on that in the next couple of weeks on that. So just keep your eye out for that. All right, Team Healthy. I will see you next time. I thoroughly appreciate who you are and what you do for each other. Blessings to you as you go forward. Bye.